Happy Sabbath, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon program where we are talking about breaking the chains of addiction. We want to welcome each one of you to this Sabbath this afternoon as we discuss on how to break the chains of addiction. With us today, we have Lambert Oigara, who is a mental health therapist. He runs his own clinic in Hurlingham called CBT Kenya. Welcome, Lambert.
Thank you.
We also have Michael Njunge Mutugi. He's not Pastor Mutugi's brother, who is a recovered alcoholic. They say recovering, but I call him recovered, and a counseling psychologist. He's an addiction counselor with LVCT Health. That is Liverpool Voluntary Counseling and Testing. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Welcome again to this program. I'm so excited to talk about addictions. You know why? It's a silent epidemic, and because of stigma, we hardly talk about it. Therapists are not very welcome, even a topic to be discussed in our homes. And yet, many of us are obsessed with physical health. Now over to you, Lambert. When most people hear of the term addiction, they immediately think of drugs. Please, can you tell us whether they are right? And you also tell us what addiction really is.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Onsando, for that very good question. Addiction, to answer your question, yes, it's true that when people talk about addiction, the first thing that crosses our mind is drugs. And maybe it's because it's the obvious common things that we are so used to and we like talking about. But there are also other addictions that are actually in society becoming a big problem. And this is what sometimes we'll call behavioral addictions. You will find that many young people are slowly getting into these addictions without knowing. Case in point, you find that we all have smartphones. And I am a very strong advocate of not giving children smartphones when they are young. And at home, we always are giving them phones to entertain themselves. And within days, they understand your phone inside out. They can open it and do all that. To the audience, you are actually already exposing your child to addiction. Because what happens when you take away that phone? The child has what they would probably call withdrawals, because they'll start crying, they start throwing tantrums, from that early stage. So what I'm trying to introduce is internet addiction, phone addictions. Some of the things that we deem to be normal. But as we think about it deeply, as someone grows older, it becomes an obsession, and one cannot do without it. Something else that is in society that people don't talk about from substance, is the issue of pornography. Pornography is a big industry. Many young people, sadly, in society are getting hooked, and we are seeing more and more teenagers coming to us because they are having problems related to that kind of addiction. So it is an issue that we sadly don't talk about, but it is here with us. Another third point I want to make before I leave it at that is the issue of gaming. Gaming is also another multi-million industry. And we are seeing more and more young people, even adults, playing PlayStation and so forth and so on, getting hooked to this addiction. And you cannot do without it. So when you talk about addiction, it's not only chemical, but there's also the behavioral addictions. Yes.
You called it gaming. I did a research recently on gambling. They've just given it the name gaming to make it more comfortable. So when you're doing it, it's like it's a game.
Yes.
And so we see people like McDonald, Mariga, they are playing, and they tell you because of gambling, they have this lavish, lifestyle. Even you, you can have it.
Yes.
Just pick your phone and do some gambling. Even in church, we do it. And yet, it's an addiction. But you didn't tell us what an addiction is.
Okay. I like simplifying it. I mean, addiction, in a simple way, is that if, for example, let's look at food. Let me use that as an example.
We are spending so much time in the
Yes.
fridge, by the way.
Yes, we are spending a lot of time. And these things have a lot of sugar. They are very tasty.
Yes.
And they bring a certain rush to the brain. And the part of the brain that gets excited, which I think will, as we continue, might talk about it, wants that more and more of that. And you develop now a pattern where you want to actually, without really, you can't get satisfied without you really controlling yourself. You want more and more of that substance or that behavior. And then with time, you start realizing it's affecting your functioning. It is affecting your relationships. I gave an example of a child who, when you actually take away the phone, they'll throw a tantrum. So when you talk about addiction, it's when you are in a situation where you are not having that substance or that behavior at that very moment. It's being taken away from you, and it's starting to affect how you function, how you interact with others. And so there's a change in your moods, there's a change in your sleeping patterns, there's a change in the way you interact with others, and as time passes by, you develop a pattern where you isolate, and nothing else matters, and nothing else comes first but the substance or the behavior. So when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you think about is your phone. How many of us do that?
All of us. All of us.
And now, if it becomes a pattern where it affects your functioning, relationships, your work, and you're spending more and more time wanting to get the next high from that thing, then that's when now it becomes an addiction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you get preoccupied with finding a way of satisfying that craving, that need. And if it's not satisfied, then you have what we call withdrawal symptoms. Okay? And you can go to any extent to get that satisfaction. Michael, welcome.
Thank
We
you.
have. I would like to ask you, being a recovered alcohol addict, I would like you to tell us how and when did you get into this mess? You look so young.
Okay, thank you. As most people will say, with drugs or getting to start anything that is illicit, it mainly starts as a curiosity. And for myself, it was so. I grew up in an environment where I was exposed to it, that I have to say. My father was drinking as well. But I can't say that that was the main influence, because I grew up in church, and growing up in church, I was still strong in it. I had my own principles by then, and I was strong even at then. But maybe somewhere along education in high school, precisely, I can say that's when maybe the shift came, where I really got curious and got involved with the wrong crowd and ended up experimenting. Now with experimenting, it just went on and on and on. And even after high school, into campus, it continued until it became full-blown, something I couldn't control.
Thank you. He has just told us the first stage of addiction, experimenting. Please, Lambert, can you also give us just a little bit of the progression and tell us some of the reasons why people get into addiction? By the way, I wouldn't want us to talk of only young people. Many times when we deal with addiction, we look at youth. But we have men who are addicted to pornography and masturbation, and marriages are breaking. We have older guys who are addicted to alcohol, and homes are in trouble. So what are some of the reasons that drive people into addiction?
Okay, maybe I think I'll answer the reasons, and then we can talk about the stages of the progression. I mean, there are many schools of thought when it comes to explaining addiction. I think one of the first important one I like to talk about today is the reality that addiction is considered a disease. Because, as mentioned earlier, it affects this part of the brain. This part of the brain I'm touching here is the one that is we call it's responsible for executive functioning. Is the one that's responsible for memory, attention, organization, you know? And it is the same part of the brain that actually when you use substance for the first time, you will feel very good. And there are chemicals that are regulated in the frontal part of the brain. There is a chemical that is responsible for pleasure, dopamine. So when you use substance, the substances we've mentioned, behavioral or chemical, that part of the brain feels that it's rewarded and it feels good. And you know, when you eat and you become satiated, you feel relaxed and feel good. Now, the thing with substance, unfortunately, is that you never get satisfied. It stays in your system for a very short time, and the minute it's out of your system, you start, like my sister was saying, craving. And you'll do anything in your powers to get the substance. So that's the first explanation. And that's why we need to understand when she says teenagers, adults, teenagers, young adults, it cuts across. Addiction does not choose, you know? So you'll find that in society, it is a big, big issue because there are so many people who their functioning has been totally affected by this disease. Another way of looking at addiction or explaining addiction is the fact that as human beings, we are always interacting with the environment. The environment is a big, big factor. Because if you're in an environment where you are already predisposed to mental health issues, there is anxiety. Like
That's
now,
a hard word.
That's
a hard word, Lambert. What do you mean predisposed?
Predisposed, when you talk about predisposing, is that you're already vulnerable. You're already vulnerable because there are other factors that are already at play, in play in your life. And that's why I mentioned anxiety, wasi-wasi. Okay? We talked about people who could also be having mental health issues, or people could be having relationship issues, you know? People who are struggling.
So in other words,
trauma.
they stress.
There's
anxiety.
already stress and anxiety. So you find that many a times someone will pick Panadol, for example. And we were talking about Panadol a few minutes ago.
Yes.
Or Piriton to sleep. Our mothers, I know, my mom used to use a lot of Piriton. I mean, if you have sleep problems, you're given Piriton. And we've heard the way people abuse. And then you feel good, you sleep. And the following day, what will you do? You will use it again. So you start finding that apart from what I've explained first, you find that the interaction with the environment and the stresses that are going on would actually drive you to try a substance, and it will make you feel relaxed. So in other words, we are already starting to self-medicate a problem. And when you ingest this substance, you feel relaxed. And next time, it serves as a memory. If you are feeling down, what will you do?
Go back to it.
You'll go back to it. So those are some of the major points, 2 points I wanted to bring out.
And idleness.
Yes.
There is also idleness. Actually, the Bible says idleness is, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And what I've heard you say is that addiction affects the frontal lobe.
Yes.
The frontal lobe. This is the part of the brain that is instrumental for reason and for judgment.
Yes.
That's what you've said. And yet, this is a very essential part of the human brain because it's the brain that accepts salvation and the love of Jesus. It's so sad that Satan comes in and attacks the very instrument we use to accept him. And so that's a very important point that you have brought. I go back to Michael. Michael, you said you grew up in the church, and a while ago you told me you were even a Pathfinder.
Yeah.
In the Pathfindery Club.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you think we can pray away addiction? And is being in church enough protection against addiction?
Well, let me start with the first question.
Yes.
Whether we can
Pray it away.
I tried that.
You did.
I tried that for so long, And it's not the fact that God doesn't answer the prayer of an addict, but the fact that the problem in itself entails things that not just prayer will address, but it needs like other interventions. So prayer is not enough. In as much as it is a component, I will say it is a component. It plays part as well, but I wouldn't say it is enough. So we cannot simply pray away addiction. There are so many other factors involved. So as to address the problems, that is one.
So
But
you are saying you tried and you failed? You even prayed about it?
in my case, if I were to be honest about it, I was drinking and coming to church. So there
Wow.
were even moments where I will be attending church and still be leading my peers as well.
Wow.
So you see, and I was praying, and at the back of the mind, every addict out there, on a logical way, knows that they are hurting themselves and they are hurting others.
Wow.
So I knew that I was hurting myself. I knew that I was hurting others. Whether the fact that they knew it or did not know it, I could feel it, and I could speak to God honestly about it.
So
Tell
you
him
felt guilty at one time.
very
You were feeling
much.
guilty.
Very much, very much.
Wow.
In fact, the fact that made me surrender is that I could not be myself at church. I could not face the congregation at church comfortably because of this. So praying it is not enough, but it adds. It's a big component of the whole effect. Yeah,
So being in church is not enough protection.
that's the second question I was just going into.
Yeah.
That being in church is not enough, because what the doctor says, it's a process and it goes on. And my process still went on even while I was still in church. So I started in high school. I was still attending church by then. The prognosis went on, and it got worse in campus, and I was still attending church in campus. After campus, I think that's where I was into the compulsive stage. And even at that stage, I could still afford moments where I could come for Sabbath. So you see, despite the fact that I was coming to church, the addiction still went on. In fact, I say for my case, maybe it came out so hard on me because I had so many years where I was hiding it from people at church, people in the community. Very, very, very few people would actually know my problem.
Wow. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, and I think he's answering. Actually, there's a question. I think you interject. The question you had asked me, he's answering it very well.
Yes.
In terms of how do you progress into substance? How does substance progress? And I like the fact that he's here because he's able to explain to us how he
Yes.
started experimenting, and you'll still come to church. He was functional. And one thing I think as Christian we need to know is that this problem of addiction is a holistic condition. It affects the person as a whole. And sometimes we have this assumption that when it comes to the management of addiction, one shoe size fits all. That if you're having an addiction problem, the only solution to this problem is prayer, like he's saying, and nothing else. And we have done that, so we do that and we continue doing that. And I think one of the challenges that we have as a society is that lack of knowledge. Okay? And they say, by people die
Because of lack
of knowledge. And I think the fact that we are here, it's important for us to be able to start getting that knowledge and appreciate that when you talk about addiction, it affects your brain chemistry, and that particular person who's having that addiction problem is suffering just like any other person who has a physical health issue. The way we treat people who have physical health issues, it's just
For
because
example,
now we have
diabetes,
corona.
cancer.
Yes.
Yes.
We will do anything in our powers to go and visit them. We are always there every evening visiting them with flowers,
Encouraging them,
with oranges, with
praying
fruits,
with them.
praying with them. That is what we encourage people to do when it comes to matters to do with
Wait a
mental health
minute.
and
Wait a
mental
minute.
health and addiction.
They got in there by choice. How can you tell me to
And
pray for
I
them?
like that because that's another thing. And we need to fight that stigma.
Yes.
They believe that this is a moral issue. Addiction is a moral issue. That person must be bad. Amejilete yo shida. You know, even when someone who comes, like he said, Michael has put it very clearly, you'd come to church as a leader. And many of us, we know people struggle, okay, with substance problems. During the week, you'll struggle. You'll come to church for spiritual nourishment. And they hope the minute we actually get to the point where this person loses hope, we've lost them. There's a reason why they are coming continuously, because they know that I have a problem and I want help. Because how do people cry out for help? They don't have to directly come and tell you, I have a problem. They can come drunk, so that you'll smell that alcohol and try to really start a conversation.
And we shun them.
But we shun them.
We isolate them.
Exactly.
We make them feel like they are not worth it.
And that is where
and we drive them back into hell.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. We need, actually, the biggest problem we have in society is the stigma. And the stigma is because of lack of knowledge. We have the information.
Yes.
We need to start understanding these people. We know it's a difficult thing, because addiction, like we said, a brain disease, you will treat it once, sometimes you treat it twice, you treat it the third time, and you find that the person is not getting better. Don't give up, because the fourth time might be the same time, this time that person will get better. It's the same with salvation. If someone comes to you the first time
and they fall,
pray for them, they fall, will you ignore them?
Yeah.
You will pick them by the hands and you will pray again. You don't give up.
You know, 1 Peter 5:8 tells us, be sober-minded, be watchful, be vigilant, for your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. It's so strong that we need to be sober, we need to be vigilant, we need to be aware that we have an enemy with us. And you see, what we are talking about are drugs that people can see and help. But we have people involved in gambling who have mortgaged everything. And yet, people don't know. They are actually driven to suicide. We have people who are addicted to masturbation. Even in the office, they have to go to the toilet to masturbate severally. And nobody knows. And they are dying quietly. So it sounds like a silent epidemic. Back to you, Michael. How easy was it to get out? And how did you get out?
Well, I think the question should be, how hard was it? Not how easy. So I would say, well, it's not easy. It's not easy. The fact that I was in church, I would say that is the easy part, because by then I had direction from the church. But it was actually very hard. It was very hard. Having tried it, like the doctor says, there is something we call withdrawal symptoms. And despite the fact that maybe for what he's calling behavioral addictions, it may not manifest itself like physically. There's something very strong, like an acquired desire in your mind, that whenever you cease using, you're not okay, and you're really convinced that you're not okay. I think that is the hardest part, to convince your brain that you are okay, despite the fact, because I could you know, I studied psychology in campus, and I could come up with ways where I wanted to self-medicate, maybe like get away from my environment, or maybe try so many other things, but it was very hard to just convince myself that I'm okay. So whenever I'll go back to an environment where I was exposed to alcohol, I would still continue drinking. So until I accepted the fact that I need help, I came to church. It was during the camp meetings. And I decided, after a period of absence from the church, to go back to church and pray to God about it, like, help me, and just ask for help from anyone. The church came on board, and rehab came around, and I got to, you know, for the first time, enjoy or get the feeling that I can do this.
Amen.
So without
That's
the help of the church, I don't think it will have been possible.
That's powerful.
Thank you.
By the way, I got to know Michael because he came to our rehab, and that's where he went through, and he made a decision not to go back to alcohol. That was 3 years ago, and he's standing strong. He went ahead and did a course on addiction. We are proud of you, Michael. Keep standing, keep encouraging, and it will be fine. Lambert, I want to come back to you a little bit and ask, how can we come out of addictive lifestyles? Can we just and out?
Okay. how do we get out?
Yes.
And I think Michael had mentioned that, had said this is a progressive disease. It starts from the experimenting, and then you find yourself wanting more and more of the substance to reach the desired effect. And then with time, you probably start manipulating people, you start lying, you start stealing. Any money that you have, you'll spend it on substance. You start going through losses, you start losing your job, you start losing your family, and it goes on, and you possibly hit rock bottom.
Yes.
Now, remember, the way it progresses is the same way then now when it comes to recovery. We need to appreciate that it does take time, because substance changes the brain chemistry. Studies have shown that when you look at the brain of someone who has not used substance and the brain of someone who has used substance, they are totally different. And that is why rehabilitation, like you are saying, is a very important component in the recovery of someone who's having addictive issues. Because time, they need to be in an environment where there is no access to substance, and they need to be in a program where they will grow spiritually, they will grow psychologically, they will grow intellectually, they will grow socially, in terms of really equipping them with skills that will help them cope. But just like Michael has said, they say that acceptance is the first step. And when you realize someone has been using substance for a long time, it might be very difficult for them to accept they have a problem.
Yes.
And that is why you need to give them time, because just like physical illness, if I have broken my leg, I will need time. You cannot expect me to just start walking immediately. The same thing with addiction. You will need that time to actually allow that person to start recovering psychologically, the brain to start reigniting itself, so that they can get in touch with what is happening in the environment. So, in conclusion, the answer is yes to your question. There is hope. We have seen many people recover. But what I would like to tell the audience is that let's not give up, especially the church. And I like Michael's story, because through church, Michael was able to get the assistance that he needed. There are so many people out there who could be struggling, who don't know where to go, who don't know how to go about this problem. It is important that we are able to actually support them and not give up on these individuals.
Amen. Thank you. Proverbs 4:23 tells us, above all, guard your heart, for out of it springs out the issues of life. We need to protect our hearts jealously. We need to be careful. One of the major ways of preventing is prevention, that you do not get unto it. Guarding your heart. And then there's an illustration about addictions. They say it's like a relationship. You know those people who have been in love? You try someone, you are not trusting them, and you call them once in a while, and then with time you find you're spending more time calling one another. After a while you find you cannot sleep without them. You cannot, and then you find you are ready to get married. Addiction is just like a relationship. And the only problem is that we get in love with the wrong relationship, and the chances of going down the drain are very hard. So one of the ways of getting out, you left out coping skills, because people get into addiction because of stress, anxiety, and all those things. So people need to be taught healthy ways of coping with challenges. And Michael, you talked about seeing people drinking, and then you just want to get. So we need to avoid triggers too. Yeah, we need to avoid triggers. Are there any other ways of getting out other than rehabilitation? Really?
Yes, there are many people who go the outpatient way.
Yes.
Like earlier on, I'd mentioned that no one shoe size fits all. You will realize that there are some people, like Michael will tell you, he says in their language, they talk about recovering addicts. Okay, they are in recovery for many years to come.
I want to cut you a little bit short. I like 2 Corinthians 5:17.
Yes.
If anyone be in Christ, he's a new creation.
Mhm.
The old has passed, behold, the new has come.
Come.
So for me, Michael, you accepted Christ, you went through baptism with us, and you are standing strong. In my head, you are recovered.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Now I will not use Michael as an example. But I'm sure Michael, if we give him an opportunity, he will explain why
Yeah.
people talk about that. There's a philosophy behind that. But again, like we've said, we believe and we know that Michael is healed in the name of
Amen.
Jesus.
Amen.
Now, but the point I was trying to make is that there are people, I was talking about, earlier on I talked about there are these people who are addicts in terms of they are already, like I'd use the word vulnerable, okay? And you'll find that these people, the minute and they sip alcohol
Yes.
or use a substance, that's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
They can't stop. They have no
Yes.
breaks.
Yes.
And then there are those people you'll find that they will sip, like the way you'll sip water, and they'll go on and on and on and on. And after 2-3 days, they are okay and they are functioning. What we call functional alcoholics or functional
Addicts.
substance
Addicts.
users. And sometimes you find that those in society are the most. Simply because they have those underlined issues. And those underlined issues are the ones that actually drive this issue called the substance issue or the behavioral addiction. And it never disappears. And it becomes a vicious cycle and becomes very challenging to manage in society. So when it comes to trying to see whether there are other ways, you find that there are people, like now the second class of people I've mentioned, who will not really need to go to rehab. They have other underlying issues. Now we will need in therapy, you'll do a clear screening and assessment and evaluation, and then now you identify that perhaps the trigger is not the substance. The trigger, like I said, is the environment.
Can be anger.
Like
Can
now
be
during the COVID,
relationships. Yeah.
this COVID time, they have said
Isolation.
isolation,
Idleness.
people losing jobs, people being in the same environment, you're in the same environment with your wife, with your children for very, very long hours. You're
Who you
not
have
going
never
out.
known.
Yes, who you've probably never known. That is a trigger in itself. And you don't know what to do, because in my lifetime, and I'm sure in your lifetime, we've never gone through such an experience. So these people don't know what to do, and then they get into substance. And when they come to us, you realize the issue is they have had to adjust to this new environment, and they are now looking for coping mechanisms. Sadly, the coping mechanism is substance. So are there other ways that they can cope? Are there ways where they can actually develop skills, like you're talking about stress and stress management, healthier ways of coping with anger, healthier ways of coping with communication, because perhaps before they never used to communicate. They will
To
come
each other,
nyumbani,
yeah.
unakula, hata ujui nani amepika chakula. The following day you're out very early in the morning. By the way, that's another addiction, workaholism.
Yes, workaholics.
You know,
Even
so
eating.
you wake up, so now because you're not working, you're not doing the way
You are
things-
not carrying work home, which you
Yes.
do. You work until midnight, wake up at 3, continue.
So I've been telling people, in fact, this period of COVID is an opportunity for us to reevaluate our lives,
Amen.
so that we can actually develop coping mechanisms that will help us stay away or keep off substances that will eventually take us to a not so very good place.
Amen.
Like we've said, it's a progressive thing. So no one shoe size fits all. There are many tools that we usually equip guys with. I've mentioned just but a few. But what is important is to understand one's story. And once you understand the story, then you can come up with a tailored program for that particular individual.
person.
Yes.
I believe what you have said coming out is not only for substance. It can go for for gambling.
Yes.
It will go for sex addiction and all those things. Some of these addictions, people think they are so private that they cannot come out of. But I think people need to know that this has affected many people. Find how many sites that are there for pornography. You will be so shocked. You will be so shocked. And they are the most visited sites of all the sites online. Now, any of you can answer the following, but I want to narrate a story. And I'm going back to marijuana, because for us now, especially the young population, it has taken them by storm. It has taken a religious and medical angle. You know, they talk about treatment for cancer. It's medicine. It can treat cancer and other autoimmune diseases. These young people talk about creativity for those who are the music industry and all that, fun and release of stress. They say it's fitting that some of these icons can invest in their own cannabis companies or partner with established brands to cash in on their fame. And these stories, our young people hear them all the time. I want to give a few examples of these famous guys who are having their own brands of marijuana. There's a man called Bob Marley. All of us know him. And now his son called Damian has a dispensary for marijuana in Denver. Then we have a guy called Wiz Khalifa. We have Snoop Dogg. He has his own marijuana company called Mary Jane. We have Melissa Etheridge. She never liked marijuana, but she got cancer. And after using marijuana, and she realized that it was helping her, she's so crazy about it that she has started a cannabis-infused wine company. Her label is called No Label Wine. And recently, she appeared at Denver's International Church of Cannabis for 420. Then there's Whoopi Goldberg, there's Madonna, there's Lady Gaga. You know, the list goes on. They have become pot activists, and they have advocated for legalization of marijuana, and they simply refuse to leave the plant at their home when they travel, be it for medical reasons or for self-expression. There's cannabis-infused lemonade. Did you know about it? There are cakes made out of cannabis. There are mandazis made out of cannabis. There are biscuits. There's so much about cannabis. Please say something about it. They say it affects the immunity system, and even COVID people have been told that if you are taking these things, I think you just need to go slow because it affects some parts of your body and your immunity system. Please say something. I know I've talked so long, but I think I wanted to lay the background.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe we can start
Yes.
with Michael. Do you want to start?
Okay. You see, we've been getting a lot of play of the whole marijuana thing, and for example, in the media, it comes with like some positive reinforcements where it is giving the youth or the current generation expectations, like positive expectations out of the same. Like growing up listening to it, like there's so much of it in the lyrics, there's so much of it in the movies, in the programs that we do watch, and by just doing that, you're getting that it is arousing the curiosity even without our knowledge. And when it comes to the point of getting exposed to it, actually you already have the expectations. You already have like I'm going to feel high, I'm going to feel good, I'm going to be, you know, you can actually, it becomes very easy to get hooked to the lie. And in as much as maybe they are downplaying the addictive part of it, well, marijuana as well is a drug, and personally having an experience in it as well, I would say it will affect the lives of so many people as well. And we
So
need to
you
be
took some
careful.
marijuana at one time?
Yeah, I did as well.
Okay.
And the effects are maybe mild, and maybe it may not affect your functionality like maybe other drugs do. Like it will be hard to like I can drink and not drive, but you can smoke and still drive. I can drink and come and maybe give a lecture or something, but it will be very hard to maybe smoke and give a lecture. So the aspect that it is mild and maybe does not have like very, very, very severe withdrawal symptoms, it is seen of as a lesser evil. And then we have like whatever the public image on it we have, well, it is becoming very, very confusing for so many people right now, and becoming a drug of choice for so many adolescents at this stage. But in my case, I would say maybe it will be okay during the very first years, but at the end of it all, it becomes highly addictive and mood altering, and you become addicted to it as well, and it affects your life and performance as well.
You know, you said something very powerful, that you hear it many times, it becomes reality.
Yeah. You actually
That's a powerful statement.
You create like an outcome in your head even before you take it.
Yes.
You see, because you've already been like as in you've been fed the idea that anytime you're feeling bad, you see, we see it in the movies or in the commercials, like maybe something like a cigarette. Let's not even use marijuana. When we were having the promotions, not even the promotions, in movies, someone is in after an argument, they smoke. Or maybe after a stressful moment they smoke. That creates like an expectation that maybe at any one time, if I'll be able to make my own decisions, if I should at one point be stressed, I can try out this. That's the same thing with marijuana and the music and the entertain idea, where like marijuana is not harmful.
Fueled by music.
Marijuana is actually what they're calling is inspirational. So by doing that, you get like, you have already created an outcome. So by smoking marijuana, you expect that you will gain potential, you expect that you will feel good, and that is a delusion.
Thank you.
I will say that is a delusion. At the end of the day, it is still addictive.
Thank you, Lambert. Say something.
And I like the way you're putting it, because there's something in psychology called conditioning, you know, whereby you expose something over and over and over again. And that's what you talk about media and what we've been exposed to, and we've come to believe that this is true, this is something that is inspirational, this is something that we can't do without, this is something that is medicinal. And if you're not using it, then you're missing out. And I think it's important for us to go back into history, because when you talk about substance or drugs, they have been there for years and years. And recently in the 70s and the 80s, in the US, there was a pandemic of heroin. And this came as a result of post-World War II. People had come from war, people had used substance then, and now it's spilled over to the United States. And I think when I talk about history, we are almost seeing history repeating itself, whereby now there's this also pandemic of marijuana. And one reality that sometimes we might not appreciate, but I know many young people watching this know, because there's internet, there is what they call medicinal marijuana. Because marijuana, just like any other pharmaceutical drugs, they have a place in society and they have helped. But now we don't look at the strains, because marijuana has many strains. And there's a strain that in society we use day in, day out, which is called THC, tetrahydrocannabinoids. Now that strain is what we in society are talking about, and because we are seeing these people saying marijuana is out there, people are producing it in large numbers. So then, out of ignorance, like I keep saying, we use it. Little do we know that there is evidence, studies that confirm that using marijuana can induce what you call hallucinations and delusions, what you call psychosis. Using marijuana can trigger what you call schizophrenia. Even if you didn't have schizophrenia in your family, using marijuana can trigger bipolar. There are studies that also. So the list can go, and then the physical health issues and so forth, and the list goes on and on and on. So sometimes we do it out of ignorance because everyone else is doing it. And then you come to a mental health professional when you are starting to have symptoms of mental health issues, physical symptoms. So my word goes to the young people. If you've not tried this substance, get information. And God forbid, don't try. Because
but you see, the information they are getting is that marijuana is good. They are going to Snoop Dogg, they are going to Lady Gaga, they are going to these guys who are telling them, we even have brands, we do the best. So it's also what information you are looking for. Just like people read the Bible, which tells them, drink a little bit of wine, it's
Yes,
good for you.
yes, yes.
So it depends on what kind of information. So how do you help
I think you're
them?
talking about who is doing that. I'm sure there are many other role models in society who actually give you more information. Like Michael has said, I mean, there's a lot of pop culture out there, a lot of pomp, and people are being used to endorse products. Because like we said earlier on, pornography, substance, those are multi-million
Dollar
industries.
businesses.
So, one will do everything in their powers to actually promote their product. The same way we are actually helping you understand this, we are giving you facts and information. It's the same way we'd encourage you to actually, before you consume a product, to think through and ask yourself critical questions. Don't look at who is doing it. Because this substance, you are the one who is ingesting it. It's getting into your body, the temple of the Lord. And you're destroying it, sadly, unknowingly. So before you ingest anything, ask yourself questions. Like I said earlier on, nowadays in the society, even foods have come into the society which have a lot of sugar. So you use that food and you don't get satisfied. You want more and more and more and more because they are sweet. Now, what is the other problem that's coming about? Obesity. And many other. And obesity is no different when you look at the chemistry. And the argument behind that, it's addiction or food addiction that leads to those problems. So we'd urge you to really take time. These things are colorful the way they are marketed, and actually they get into your brain unknowingly. And the more you watch it, the more you feel like this is something
acceptable.
I want to try. It's acceptable. It's okay. And 1 month, 2 months, you can't do without it. And like we said, progressively, as a young person who was very promising, your life was going this way.
Now it drops down.
Then now you actually finding yourself coming to Lambert over and over and over again because of the substance problem. Having to go to rehab because of the substance problem. Whereas this time, if you take this time and really understand what this substance is, then you will probably realize that the longer you stay without trying substance, the better. And most importantly, if you don't try it at all,
you're not a wimp.
Yes.
You're not a wimp if you do not take substances. And then they are saying this chemical HTC, they are saying now it's 25 times more potent than it was in the 1970s. That's very dangerous. And I keep saying, if it's medicine, for example, Panadol is medicine. Do we take medicine all the time, or we take it under prescription? You see, we are being taken round in circles. Then they say it's good for meditation. I don't know. What can you say about meditation?
Okay, when you talk about treatment, and that's what I mentioned, no one shoe size fits all. Really there are ways and means that have helped people get in touch with their thoughts, their emotions, and their behaviors, whereby you're able to really reflect on yourself and redirect energy and focus on yourself. So when you talk about substance, I think Michael mentioned that, of course, every substance has a pro and a con. And perhaps that's why you find that, let's be candid, young people will want to use it because you use it the first time you're having issues and you are inspired and you're able to see colors and you become creative. And the way you're talking about Bob Marley, those are some of the stories that will make someone say that they will want to continue using because it gives me inspiration. It actually makes me things that I would not ordinarily see when I don't use. But the question here
What are you
is, the question here is, what are the effects? Because the short-term effect, it gives you a very good high. It actually plays around with your mind and you feel relaxed, and the meditation you're talking about, you're able to meditate. But sustainability is another issue. Is this behavior sustainable? Okay? When you talk about marijuana, sometimes, you find that there are people who have used it over the years, and then like I said, it changes the way you interact. And Michael is here. You're a witness, and you've
In
told
fact, I
it
was
does
having a
actually
discussion with
change you.
someone in the US sometime last year, and he said here in Kenya, marijuana is for the young people, but in the US, it's for the top CEOs because they use it to deal with stress. So there's so much that is talked about marijuana. But I want to move on a little bit. Michael, how did the church assist or discourage you as a leader when you were going through addictions?
Well, there's something he mentioned about the addiction being a moral issue. So it becomes even stronger when you come to the church. You see, outside there, already people believe that drinking or maybe using marijuana is something bad or something evil. But when you come to the church, now that idea becomes reinforced. It becomes even stronger. And it is very hard for the church folk to deal with someone who is an addict. Because I would get a lot of stigma. There are people who would not even say hi to you. And then there will be like sneers and the talks and the whispers and gossips. Maybe they will not really get to me, but they will get to my mom. And that affected me as well, you see. And in a sense, I would say, in as much as I myself was strong for the church, I did not feel like the church was well accommodating as per that moment. But after the whole issue of coming out and maybe acknowledging it, it became easier. So I would say for people who are out there and they are suffering, the church is not something they find well accommodating. You see, there's more of how the church sets a standard. Like we have to conform to such, and we have to present ourselves in such a way. And whenever an addict is approaching the church, they kind of feel like, I'm already off the mark. You see? So they're already out. And when they come into the church and there's no one to actually, or there's no one to identify themselves with in the church, it becomes very hard. Because we don't see, no one in church here comes out clearly and says that I am here for those who are addicted, or I'm here for those who are falling or sinning. We only have people who are here to congratulate those who are standing and with a strong will and all that. So it becomes very hard to identify with the church.
Wow.
Very, 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 very hard.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And yet when we look at the life of Jesus, he identified with those who were cast down, the poor in the society, people like Mary Magdalene, people who had no status in the society. Yeah. And yet you come in the church, you feel you have no place. That's so powerful. I hope, church, we are listening so that we can understand. I want to appreciate or acknowledge those who have been with us: Ruth Namyomba, Bruce Otieno, Ruth Mwangi, David Amo. And one of the questions from Ruth Namyomba, I think I want to send it to you, Lambert. How do you help an addict who does not want any help or does not accept they have a problem? Because Michael has already told us acceptance is the first step. How do you deal with such a person?
It's simply put, don't give up. It's hard. Like we've said, addiction is a brain disease. And you might think that that person does not know or appreciate that he has a problem, but it's probably really deep, and they themselves have progressed to a point where they are on their way to hitting rock bottom. So it's just like saying, and I like using this example, someone who has a physical health issue, for example, cancer, and they have never accepted that they have that problem. What do? You
take them, they get injections by force. That's easy.
But it's usually very complex, you know? It's very complex because it really takes, and I understand why she's asking that question, because it takes a toll on the person who's trying to help this individual.
Yes.
Because this person is not accepting.
Yes.
They've been diagnosed with a terminal health issue, maybe it's first stage, and they are told, if you go through this procedure, there's a 90% chance that you'll be okay. But they sabotage everything. What we do is we continue trying and supporting them. But also you, the person, it's important for you to get to an environment where you have support. Because sometimes I feel for their caretakers, the caregivers, because at times you can find that at the end of the day, you are the one who now needs more help.
Yes.
So it's important as you're trying to reach out to help that person who doesn't have what we call insight, who is taking care of you. That is my answer and also challenge that person, because you also need to be with a support network. You need to also talk to a professional perhaps who can take you through this, so that you come to the point of accepting the reality of the
your
situation.
Michael, do you think it would have worked before you reached that stage?
If I've had interventions before reaching to that stage, well, I can say not even just getting to that stage. If the church was more adamant, like with training us with the prevention part of it, and not just assuming like it will be okay. Because I would say in my training as an adventurer, as a pathfinder, coming on into the ambassador stage, the ambassador stage, that's where they first talk about drugs. And it is an idea of you guys, it's something that you should just know. We have drugs and we have the classifications,
And
but
it never happens to us.
it is not something for you.
Yes, it's not for you.
There's such an attitude that comes, it is not for you. And I myself was enveloped in that attitude that it is not for me, it is not for me. And even while I was experimenting and getting to, I had that resolve that I would get over it because it is not for me. And I think if the church would have played a role in like preparing me, that even while in church,
you can get hit.
Yeah, I think it will go to a lengthier way in maybe avoiding it.
So your challenge is to the church that we need to sensitize the members that this is a real problem. It's no respecter of anybody. It can get us right in the church.
Yes.
And so we need people to be aware. Number two, that even when you are in it, we are still with you. We can help you walk the process and we can bring you out. Something that is not happening.
Exactly.
Okay. What do you tell a parent? A mother who has cried, the pillow is wet every evening, praying the child out of these addictions. A wife whose husband is addicted. A man whose wife is addicted. How do you tell this person? What do you tell them?
Do not despair and get help. Why do I say get help? Because it's related to the first question. Because sometimes we are in a situation where the reality is clearing that I have done everything humanly possible. And I am at a point where if I don't do something for me to be able to continue helping this person and supporting them, then I'll end up being the person who's unwell. Because remember, there's no physical health without mental health. So you remember, you are using
Say it again.
There is no physical health without mental health. So you who is putting all your energy, you're crying, you're doing everything, you've used all your resources, you're now reaching out to people to support you, to take the person for treatment and so forth and so on. You yourself are running from the reality of the fact that there could be things that are making you not forget about yourself, to a point where now you are fixated on this project, and I call it a project, of actually doing what you have to do to help this person, and yet you clearly know that you are doing everything humanly possible. So what happens, God forbid, if this person does not recover? What happens to you? So it is important as a parent, it's important as a caregiver, it's important, even we professionals, to be able to get someone who can work with you.
Support system.
Support systems are very important in church, at home, and any other environment. Support. And most importantly, fighting this thing called ignorance. Because sometimes we'll do things blindly. You meet the professional tries to guide you and help you. You meet the spiritual leader, tries to help you, to guide you, but you are still fixated, like I say, and also you are running. So parents, as your children, as your relatives, as your friends who are struggling with mental health issues or substance related problems are getting help, it is important also for you to accept that you also need help.
Wow.
Period. Because, like I said, it's a holistic problem, and addiction is a family disease.
Wow.
It does not only affect the patient or the client, it affects everybody, because huyu mtu akuja nyumbani amekunywa pombe, ametumia drugs, see, they disrupt everything.
You know, I had a friend, a lady I met in a training, and she told me about her husband who was addicted to alcohol. She says when he comes, sometimes he comes and is pooping on himself on his way upstairs, and she has to spend time to clean after him. Sometimes he comes, he has fallen, and she has to bandage him. It is so bad.
Imagine the emotions that
Yes.
person is going through. This is someone who was very functional, maybe
Yes.
someone who went through all the stages of family life, bringing up children, career-wise, and then now this is happening.
Yes.
How is it affecting you as the wife or the
Yes.
husband?
How do
That's why
people
I'm saying
feel
it's
you?
important, because psychologically you are getting affected. It's important to process this.
You know, my own neighbor across the road, I watched the husband die of alcoholism. I watched him die. In fact, my husband is the one who took him for his last breath to the hospital. Because he drank himself silly, and he used to fall wherever he falls, and he had, are they called tumors, whatever, all over the brain. And when he went for operation at Kenyatta Hospital, they touched some nerves, and he couldn't talk for 4 years before he died. And even after he came out of hospital, he kept drinking. He would come home, his pants are wet after suturing, and finally he could be brought by people. The son could put his number in his coat. So wherever he has drunk and he has fallen, people get the son's number and they call him. And it was such an agonizing stage before he died. We prayed about it. He couldn't get out. I still feel that we can actually force people into rehabilitation, especially when they are a danger to themselves and to the society. There's a lot of no, you shouldn't. People need to agree. But sometimes when you are in dire straits, you need to make some of these decisions. As we wrap up, what do you think, Michael?
Well,
You're wrapping up.
I would say interventions, maybe it comes with a degree. You can be forced and it can work.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also be voluntary and you can relapse as well.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing I have to say with any caregiver or anyone who is handling an addict is that the one thing every addict out there craves is love and attention.
Mm-hmm.
So just give them love, continue giving them love. Whether they fall or rise, whether you force them into it or whether you convince them into it. There is no way, just like Daktari says, there is no way that fits all. So even forcing them, it has worked in some cases. I've seen cases where people have been forced to rehabilitations and they've come out good and continued to live their lives free of whatever drugs they were using.
Thank you, Michael. Time is up. Above all, watch your heart, for out of it flows the issues of life. Thank you, Michael Mutugi, for being here with us. Your information has been so informative. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Lambert. By the way, I've been a client of his, so going for counseling is not something out of the way. I don't think you'll be afraid of me after this. May God bless each one of us as we think about this. Shall we pray? We thank you, dear Jesus, for reminding us that the addiction is here with us because we live in a world of sin. You have warned us to guard our hearts because out of it flow the issues of life. But Lord, while some of us are in it, help us to love them, to accept them, and to support them so that they can receive the help they need. We pray for your presence in us and in our church so that, Father, we may have love for one another, even those who are fallen by the wayside. Bless us and keep us, for we have prayed in Jesus' name. Amen.
naamini watoka kwake, Muumba wa vyote, ndiye Alfa na Omega, mweza vyote, ni Bwana. Natazama milimani, msaada wangu watoka wapi? Naamini watoka kwake, Muumba wa vyote, ndiye Alfa na Omega, mweza vyote, ni Bwana. Tumtumaini maishani, shida zijapo tusonga, tunaye Kristo, ndiye Alfa na Omega, mweza vyote, ni Bwana. Tumtumaini maishani, shida zijapo tusonga, tunaye Kristo, ndiye Alfa na Omega, mweza vyote, ni Bwana. Ndiye Alfa na Omega, mweza vyote, ni Bwana.